We want to make sure to, as we can, mute our microphones. Another Zoom kind of tip is that there's a gallery view. If you want to see kind of everybody who's on the call, kind of like a Brady Bunch style, that's what I recommend. Otherwise, whoever makes noise most recently will be the big speaker, a big portion of your screen. It's a lot better to kind of see who all is with us with gallery view. And then if you have to chat, if you have any questions, you can send to me. If you have questions or requests for the group, on the bottom sidebar there, it's called a chat screen. So you can type in a message and also put a recipient, a specific individual or to everyone. So that's the quick orientation. And since that is now done, let's get started. I have a chalice lighting for us tonight.
Yeah, did you mention that we can chat?
Hearing anybody talk.
Okay. Let's do a quick just mic check here to make sure everyone's hearing things and seeing things.
The feedback is horrible. I can't understand anything.
Okay. I'm going to mute people here quick. Okay. I'm not sure what's happening, everybody, but thank you for your patience. I'm going to go ahead and mute people who aren't speaking right now. It's going to really help us with any feedback we might be experiencing. So I'll start there. Okay. I have a chalice lighting for us tonight. Why a flaming chalice? The question comes. It's the cup of life, we answer. A cup of blessings overflowing. A cup of water to quench our spirit's thirst. A cup of wine for celebration and dedication. The flame of truth, the fire of purification. Oil for anointing, healing. Out of chaos, fear, and horror. Thus was the symbol crafted a generation ago. So may it be for us. In these days of uncertainty, sorrow, and rage, and a light to warm our souls and guide us home. And I do have a chalice down here as well. I see that Rick is holding one up as well. Thank you, Rick. Well, thank you all for bearing with us with these technical difficulties. I'm going to unmute the participants on their phone, and I'll just ask them to mute themselves on their phone. Otherwise, you might get a lot of audio feedback, but I'll have to unmute you here. Okay? So yeah, whoever is calling in on their phones, please mute your phones. And I just want to take a quick moment to do a brief check-in. So I'd love to hear people sharing their name and congregation. And what I'm curious about tonight is briefly a brief description of how your congregation is handling the election, what kind of political diversity you have in your congregation or that you're aware of, and how the congregation is attending to all the needs of the congregants. And then the real meat of the question that I'd love to hear you share is what part of Unitarian Universalism, of the UU faith, are you really leaning into during this time? What are some of your anchor points? So it sounds like we have about 12 or 13 here. So let's just say maybe a 2-minute check-in. Everyone can keep themselves to just 2 minutes. So please unmute yourself when you're ready and share.
Okay, well, I think I can go first then. My name's Melissa Birch. I'm with the Northwoods UU Fellowship up in the Brainerd, Pequot Lakes, Pine River area. We are We have about 14 members, but we're passionate members, so we count ourselves big. And we are not terribly diverse politically. We tend to be on the same page most of the time, but that's easier when you're a very small group. And I think what I'm really focused on at this point is putting things into action. I'm finding comfort in doing the social justice thing and making that part of my day every day.
I'm Sue Daly. I'm here with 3 other members from my congregation. I've got Gretchen and Will, Gretchen Proch, and Will and Sally Munger are with me. And we're here at a time of needing community. I think we've all been to meetings where we have had check-ins about how we are after the election. And otherwise, I don't think we've had a whole lot of processing and are looking forward to seeing what we can do in this electronic communion.
You didn't tell them.
I'm going to mention something that Sue doesn't know. I co-chair the forums committee, and on December 4th, there will be a forum, which we'll call a hot topic on the election and what the voters are trying to tell us.
Tell them what city we're in.
Oh, salute.
We're in Duluth. And we not this past week, but a week ago, our forum was focusing on the events out in North Dakota. And so we have been in fairly close connection with them and have members who have been out to Standing Rock. With that, Will, did you want to add?
I just was going to comment on the diversity you said of our political thoughts that we have. I don't know that we can really answer that, but I always assume most Unitarians are Democrats, but I've long learned that that isn't true.
Great. Thank you all for being there in the Duluth congregation. Thank you for gathering together in person and bringing that gathering to us here. Thank you.
I have one more question, Jack. My screen is saying that we're recording. Are you recording, or is that something that I did by mistake?
No, yes. Thank you for that reminder, Sue. I forgot to let people know. We do record these calls. That way others can learn what we're learning and share with us in that process. Yep. So I'm recording this, and then if you have any concerns about that, please reach out to me about that. Otherwise, as long as no one has concerns, we probably will be posting this for other UUs in the state to access.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Sue.
Yeah, we have roughly 200 members.
Hi, my name's Laura Thompson, and I'm the minister at Minnesota Valley UU Fellowship in Bloomington, Minnesota. We have 170, 180 members. Our diversity, again, as most UUs tend to lead towards liberal progressive, so that's true for us. But we, as a minister, I'm aware that there are some of our members who would identify historically as leaning more conservative. That was, and I would say that was a hard place for them to be in this year, because they voiced that they felt like they really didn't have a place that politically represented them well this year in the election. So, so that was has been a hard thing for them to manage through. And we, being in Bloomington, which is a little redder than most of the Twin Cities, we're kind of surrounded. Our parish, our church is surrounded by a more conservative neighborhood, so that we have that as well. And what I lean into right now, I think somebody said earlier, our commitment to social justice work. I think if we weren't awake before this election, we should be pretty awake now. And so for me, like, our commitment to doing work that's rooted in justice, as opposed to just holding on to liberal idealism, which is wonderful, but it's just idealism. I think action is something that I hold on to right now. And I'm glad to be here tonight. So thanks for having us, Jack.
Can
you hear me?
Who's that? Hi, this is Mary Lou, and I'm from Wilmer. I live in Wilmer, and I belong to the UU Church in Wilmer, and there are about 35 members. Wilmer is a very conservative community, and so, but most of the UUs actually are liberal, in our group are liberal. So it's kind of a difficult place to be at times. Wilmer also has the second largest Somali population in the state, and also a very large Hispanic population. And so I went to an Isaiah meeting last week, and there were a lot of Hispanics talking about how they were afraid that they were going to be removed from the state, and they're very worried. And the children are being have been called names and stuff by their classmates. So it's an issue in the Wilmer area, and it's all come out of the election and the campaign. So Wilmer right now has a lot of fear in it. Thank you.
I'm Julie Gilkinson, and I'm with the Rochester Unitarian Universalist Church, and we have around 350 members, not that many that are active, but still. And yeah, we don't have a lot of political diversity, but we do have some Republicans. And the day after the election, I was in Oregon, but our minister held up a little service in the evening because people felt, well, actually, I'm not sure who, anyway, it was a gathering, a little service. I'm not sure that he held it since I wasn't there. But anyway, that was very meaningful to people. It was important for them to be able to come together. But there were, some Republicans who spoke up and said, well, it was a nice idea. They didn't think they should come. So then Reverend Fritz, addressed that in the sermon, not this week, last week. So anyway, but, talking about how we do need to reach out to others and try to get things done and be optimistic and positive. And we do, on our Social Justice Council, our task force, we have been, so we have a thing called, that we got the MUUSJA award for the Hawthorne Helps, and where there are a lot of immigrants and a lot of, Muslim students. And, so we were, had our little store this past week, and we're wrote messages of love and support that we displayed. And then we also had a meeting with, a lot of us attended an outreach the Muslim community does once a month. So we have a large Somali population. We have a large Hispanic population too. But anyway, so yeah, again, social justice work, social service outreach, is how we're proceeding. We're also working hard on the Standing Rock.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
I'm not
we can
sure I'm
hear
doing
you.
this right.
We can hear you.
Okay. Thank you. I couldn't get on the Zoom thing tonight. I'm always overwhelmed by technology.
I understand. Well, thank you for being here.
Anyway, Jane Bacon, the White Bear UU Church in Matamidi, which is just north of St. Paul. And we are a large church, about 780 maybe. And we actually, our ministers changed the service the Sunday after the election. And basically, in many ways to me, and asked the choir to sing. And we sang songs of social justice. And that was kind of the focus of the service. And there may be some political diversity, but I would say for the most part, the congregation seemed completely just dismayed. And we had one of the biggest turnouts that we've had. It was like Christmas Eve plus. So we seem to, I don't know, there may be people who voted differently, but where we talked about it to the election, the ministers were always careful to talk about what people are voting for and to hold up the our commitment to racial equality and caring about the earth and the environment and those particular acts of I think our principles. So that would be pretty much the focus. And I think we're continuing to move forward with the Global Climate Change Committee, met the night after the election, and the Social Justice Committee met, and we are moving forward. But I would say certainly in our congregation there's a lot of up and down emotion, and kind of hard to focus on what needs to be done when it feels like there's a grieving process going on. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, this is Carolyn Towler. I'm from the Bemidji Headwaters Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, and I would say that I would resonate with a lot of what has been spoken regarding our congregation. We are grieving this election, and during our Joys and Concerns candle lighting, we spent about 20 minutes talking about the aftermath of the election, which is unusually long. So I guess what I'm on the Social Justice Committee and the chair, and what kind of keeps me going is the being involved in action, and I guess another thing someone mentioned about there's a lot of fear in the community in Wilmer, I think it was, and definitely in Bemidji there's been people that have kids that have been kind of slandered in their racial disparity, and there's been some accosting of a gay man, and our mayor has stepped up to the plate and said this is not to be tolerated, and getting community groups together to stand against what's starting to go on. So that's a positive thing. And I think what keeps me going is not just take action, but the inherent worth and dignity of every human being, even Trump. Although I really struggle with the kind of human that he is, I think that it's a good reminder to me that it's a good belief system, I think, to have and to continue to have. So that's all I have.
Great. Thank you, Carolyn.
My name is Naomi, and I'm at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Minnetonka, which is in Wayzata. And we have about 170 or so members, and we're in the process of building a new church, which is really exciting. We had a vigil the day after the election. I think there were about 40 or so people that showed up and just shared. We had maybe an hour and a half of time of just processing for folks. And there were quite a few folks, too, that weren't even members of our church that showed up for that because it was kind of publicized in the community. Our minister, Kent, did switch up. He actually wrote 2 sermons, one based upon either outcome and kind of different tones, and obviously the one with the tone of we have a lot of work to do was the one that was chosen. And we also, I'm new, well, I've been to the church, I've been a member for about 2 years, but I'm new to the role of the social justice facilitator at the church. And we haven't had someone in that role for a few years now. And so I've had, this past Sunday especially, I mean, more than a handful of people come up wanting to get involved, which I think personally is really encouraging, but also for our church too, our church community. And so that kind of, interaction for me is really recharging. And I think it is also for folks to kind of have a way to share their, the work that we need to do now, especially in the current political climate. Our RE classes, from what I heard, for youth had some discussion. And we also did the words of encouragement and sidewalk writing. And yeah, I think that's what I have to share.
Well, I'm Rick Gravrock from First Universalist Church in Minneapolis. I think we have like 1,000 members now. Jack, do you know that number better than I do? Well, I went with a van full of UUs November 1st, 2nd, and 3rd to Standing Rock, and was quite an experience to be there. Especially on Thursday when those over 500 ministers from around the country came there and renounced the doctrine of discovery. That was totally amazing. And yet today I see that the armed forces there are spraying water on people at 27 degrees and attacking them in other ways too. It's bad news. What keeps me going is, well, I read a lot about what's happening to the planet, so I have a lot of fear about what's happening with the climate, and the future is looking pretty bleak, and yet I still get up and do things because of the kids and the animals that don't deserve the consequences that I understand we're bringing to them. And I'm happy to be a member of the church. We had 5 different people of color split up and do the homily at church on Sunday. And it's good to hear from people that aren't white people that give us their perspective on what's going on. And I did not vote for Trump, but I have come to understand there are some commonalities between what I believe in and what I think some of those people are voting for. I'm not going to get into that right now, but I think I'm looking for common ground, because we really, really, in my opinion, need to work together across the political spectrum. And so I need to find out what we have in common. Thank you.
Well, we've heard from almost everybody right now, but there's still a few left who might want to share. For those that joined late, just a reminder, we want to do a brief check-in with your name, your congregation, kind of a few details about the congregation and how they're handling this post-election time. And then also to talk about what components of our Unitarian Universalist faith that we're really holding on to in this time, and what are we using as anchor points. So I'll just kind of open it up again if others want to share before we move on to the next part of our convening call.
No.
There we go. Sorry about that, Bill. Can you speak up a little bit and try again?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Good. This is Bill Weir in Minneapolis. I'm a member of First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis, a retired Unitarian Universalist minister, producer of several television series, and I'm currently in consultation with a Harvard University professor who is one of the world's experts on the Electoral College. I consulted him today, and I think I have a plan that may lead to a different outcome with the Electoral College. I spoke of this last Sunday at a noon gathering at First Unitarian Society, and a few others showed interest in this after the meeting. So I may be in touch with a number of electors in red states, seeking 38 of them in total, who will vote for the presidential candidate who won the national popular vote. There are a few states that have already adopted an agreement that they will cast their electoral votes for the winner of the national presidential popular vote. I think they, for the most part, if not totally, are blue states. And I think that a concerted campaign by a small group in little Minnesota could sway 38 of these several hundred electors from other states to vote for the candidate with the most votes. After all, we elect other people by that means. It's only with the Electoral College that we allow our have allowed our popular vote to be ignored in favor of the electoral college vote.
Great. Thank you for that check-in, Bill. Just wanted to maybe see if anybody else wants to do a quick check-in before we move on to the next portion of the night.
Jack, I was just going to wait, or do you want me to go now?
You can go now, Laura.
Okay, so I'm Laura Smidzik. I'm the minister over at Michael Servetus Unitarian Society. Started the same time as Laura Thompson, so we're both just about 4 months old in our jobs. And one of the reasons I was interested in Michael Servetus is because there is a political diversity there. It's not a large amount, but there's members who've been there 50 years who are Republicans, who've been strong leaders in the church and who are open about being Republicans. So prior to the election, I had dinner with 5 of them just to sort of make sure they felt like I was their minister, and that they, knew that I was, cared about them and wanted to be connected with them. After the election, I also held a vigil. We also held a vigil, but I made sure to email them first just to let them know a vigil was going to happen and that we were leaning into hope and unity versus like a Trump bashing, session. They were most appreciative of that. We did my sermon. We also switched up the sermon just because it seemed ridiculous to do anything other than a direct reaction to what went on. But I've been really leaning into heavily into the universalism kind of. I've been using a Forrest Church quote about the universalist gospel, which really tells you, you need to be able to see your tears in other people's eyes and to love your enemy as yourself and respect and embrace otherness versus tolerate it. I really see our church as a place where people in the congregation can use it as a laboratory. So I'm really, pushing people to practice their faith where they sit, where they are, where they show up on Sunday morning. And it's easier said than done, but I will talk more about that later. But definitely I find that, I really do think leaning into our faith has kept me sane during this past almost 2 weeks or 2 weeks. So most appreciative for all that's sunken in deep into my bones, even though it's not easy to practice.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Kay Slama from the Wilmer area, the Wilmer Church. We were blessed to have Jack come out and talk with us last Sunday about healing our hearts post-election edition. And in fact, I've never had anyone ask for the text to a speech before, and several people asked him, and we got that around to everyone. It really was a way to start healing. And now I'm hoping to continue this with you folks tonight. I see we're supposed to talk about what parts of our faith we're leaning into. I think I have to really work on the respect for every human being, our first principle right now. So I'm really working on that. Done.
Well, perfect. I guess I'll just kind of give a quick little check-in as well. So I'm Jack, and I'm part of MUUSJA, but I also attend First Universalist Church. And as Kay mentioned, and Mary Lou, I got to preach at Wilmer right after the election. And the practice of crafting a sermon that attended many people's needs, and to noticing many different griefs and fears and senses of loss that maybe happened in that week. It was a really big challenge, and it was good. And one of the things I'm holding with me, which I will kind of get into more in a bit, is this idea that you can, if you are grieving, you can hold that grief and also create a space for mobilizing too, and brainstorming action, and you can hold both. My friend and colleague, Sarah Smalley, said we contain multitudes. So being able to give people the space to be in those different spaces felt really valuable. Well, thank you all for that check-in. I'm glad to know where everyone is, what they bring with them tonight, and a little bit more about our state's congregations. As Laura Thompson mentioned in our group chat down here, it's really great to see so many different people across the state coming together in this call. So thank you for being here. So I guess I would just like to spend a little bit of time talking about a few things that I think will be helpful. One of them is this concept of fusion politics that I've been reading about by the Reverend Dr. William Barber. He wrote the book called The Third Reconstruction, and he also is the main founder of a movement called the Moral Monday movement in North Carolina. And he recently hosted a revival here in the city and did a clergy training that I got to be part of. And in it, he really challenged us that were there to think beyond just the terms liberal and conservative. And I kind of unpacked that more with Ashley Haran, the executive director of MUUSJA, and talking more about what would it look like to not use those terms as much as terms dealing with people's oppression or liberation. So progressing more along the lines of towards liberation for more people. And that was a really interesting recast for me. And then moving forward even deeper into Dr. Barber's works, his passion is this idea of fusion politics. So this idea where two different camps, two different sides politically, sometimes even have the same goal, the same stated goal about one particular thing, but different tactics on how to get there. So to think through what could this look like if we actually do have shared goals in specific things, like I could potentially throw out a lot of examples, but the idea of having a shared goal and having different visions on how to get there, but working through some of that difference and working together towards those goals. Just a very basic concept that I think is gaining traction. And I think there's a lot of value. And what I don't want to be heard saying is like this idea of, can't we all just get along? You know, like this isn't just a question of who we are willing to tolerate, but how do we actually work together? How do we make space to find our common ideologies amidst those different tactics? It feels more like a question of cooperation and association, even across difference. So one of the reasons I brought both Laura Smidzik and Laura Thompson into this call tonight is to kind of talk through some of that and what they're learning about trying to work with a congregation that has very different political views within it. And then the other component I just wanted to bring up before we move into that conversation with them, is this idea too of personal engagement. So I think there's been a call in this election for people who maybe didn't get the result they were hoping for, both in resisting inequitable policies and still advocating for policies that are just and equitable. But the other component I don't want to miss out on is this idea that one of the important things is to also personally engage where our policies are failing. So if a policy is not in place or a hurtful one is in place, where is our call as individuals to still mobilize and do the work that the policies are not doing or are trying to undo? So the idea of just not leaning on leaders or policies to do sometimes work that we also can do through grassroots mobilizing work. So those are kind of just some thoughts I had that I wanted to bring to the group before we open up the conversation with the Lauras. Yeah, and if you have any questions, I'll post some of these resources online afterwards. It looks like Laura Thompson just posted that on the group chat. Thank you, Laura. So Laura and Laura, I would love to hear from you more. How are you working with people in your congregations with different political viewpoints, and what have you learned from that process? Laura Smidzik, you just shared a little bit, but maybe starting with Laura Thompson, what are kind of some of your takeaway learnings right now, and what are some sticky points for you?
Yeah, I didn't have a gathering of my known Republicans, but I reached out to them all individually. I also one of the members of my board is a Hennepin County detective, and he was in North Dakota recently as well, on the other side of the lines. And so it's interesting as a minister to really make space, you know, and be in a space of supporting the water protectors, and also be in a space of supporting his wife, who was here with their young children while he was up on those lines, and he was in danger as well. So for me, it really comes down to recognizing the division, that if you weren't aware of it before the election, you clearly, I think, have to be aware of the division in this country now. And I'm trying to figure out ways to heal that. And even before the election, I mean, this has been part of my own philosophy of ministry for a while, but you know, that it's not enough that we partner with other liberal organizations, other liberal progressive faiths when we do justice work, that we really need to reach out to the churches down the street who have a very different theology than ours and find out what kind of work we can do with them. And maybe we're not obviously going to be working on the same side of a same-sex issue or maybe a Black Lives Matter issue, but certainly we can come together to make the community better, or work on issues of poverty, or things that we can agree on, and start working on healing some of that division. So I think that's one thing we need to do. Our congregation, two things that we're doing right now. One of them was before the election. We were already signed up to sponsor a refugee family through the Minnesota Council of Churches. So we were already preparing for that, and that work's just become now something that we can really lean into, and understanding the plight of refugees as that's become different now, possibly with the results of the election. And then another thing that I'm doing is I just ordered 250 lawn signs, like the political signs that go in your yard, since we had to see them. And that was so painful for many of us during the election to see so many signs that were, you know, for whatever the other side was for us. And so I wanted to create a sign that was more unifying, maybe, and reminded us of our basic principles that we might have in common with others. So I'm going to have 250 signs that say "Love your neighbor," and then in parentheses it kind of says, you know, your Black, brown, LGBT, disabled, religiously different, fully human neighbor. Hoping that maybe people will want these signs, and then more people will order these signs, and maybe instead of driving down the street and seeing all these campaign messages that are against us, we could come together with a common message of love and acceptance. So that's what those are two things that I'm trying to work on, you know, within the congregation. And just, but I think one thing that we can really do is try to reach out to those folks. And of course we have an opportunity to do that on Thursday, as we all, you know, prepare to go see family members that might have differing views. Try to find the things that we have in common, you know, instead of talking about what your differences are, you know, ask each other what your faith says about love and about helping each other out, and maybe we can find some common place to start from there.
Thank you, Laura. Laura Smidzik, do you want to take that question as well?
Sure. Hey, Laura Thompson, I think you should figure out a site where people can order those signs. So you don't have to be the main distributor. Put them on whatever that is, Etsy or whatever the heck that is.
I'm working on it. I'm realizing that my new side business might become selling lawn signs. So.
Yeah, that's why you should get yourself out of the middle. Yeah, yeah. I was thinking a lot about the marriage amendment when you think of fusion politics, because when I ran Project 515, which was one of the organizations that ended up hiring the folks who actually brought the campaign to the end, we had an equal number of Democrats and Republicans on our board. And so it was an area where, having both parties was really helpful. That sense about carrying different messages was very true back then. We didn't use the marriage word, well, out front used the marriage word, but we were in the back rooms together. So I do, I have seen times where working across political lines not only is helpful, but it strengthens that which we do, which is really awesome. I was going to say one of the main books I leaned on right after the election, and I know that they've been preaching from First Universalist from it as well, is called Hope in the Dark, and I can post it on the on our reference list. But I love how Rebecca Solnit talks about history, and she says that it's not really a straight line, that often it's kind of like a crab, that moves back and forth, or it's a drip of water that slowly makes an indent over time. And I find those helpful images to realize history has happened in all sorts of ways in our lifetime. And there are ways, if it's moving around like a crab, you got some opportunity to get involved there and to make some shifts along the way. And I feel like as Unitarian Universalists that, it's important to me personally and to talk to the congregation about that we have personal work to do ourselves. Like as Kay said, sometimes it's really hard to see the other person as fully holy, as fully, a person of inherent worth and dignity when it feels like they're threatening that which we all cherish. But I feel like, that work within, so really encouraging people to pick up a daily spiritual practice. I mean, my board chair is like, I wake up in the morning and I sit in my chair. Can that be a daily spiritual practice? And I'm like, well, as long as you do it with intention, like, go into it with gratitude, come out of it with gratitude, acknowledge what's happening, but really talking to people about making sure they're doing their own spiritual work so that we can make it through this time without moving into chronic depression or anger or whatever else. And then since my congregation really is diverse, we're talking about that sense of politically diverse. How are we among each other and really using our church as a laboratory, which let me just tell you is easier said than done. So I ran the program Beyond the Partisan Divide, which is one of the UUA curriculums. They have 2 versions of it. One of it's 2 hours that includes a lot of video clips, and the other one is an hour and a half that includes mostly readings. And I scheduled it for after the election because I ran out of time before. And of course, I thought Hillary was going to win. So I had this whole different image as to what it would be like. And with rather tender emotions, we had 1/3 Republicans and 2/3 Democrats. And it got into some serious murky water together. It was hard. It was hard and it was painful. And, that reality of leaning on language that comes out through anger happened a lot. So really working on if we can't do it here, where can we do it? How are we going to manage Thanksgiving that's ahead or other things that are ahead? So I think that sense about I've been leaning really heavily on Meg Riley's Prayer for Difficult Conversations. If you guys probably have that, it's online. I put it in the order of service this weekend for people to ponder as they're at Thanksgiving. That anxiety over the holidays has caused people to burst into tears in church, realizing they're going to be among family members who think so differently from them. But like we have our book group decided to read Healing the Heart of Democracy. We'd spoken about that in the service previously, but I think they're trying, they're working through how can we learn to be in this new world with each other. And I would just say that the beyond piece is something that we're still trying to figure out. And it is harder. I think the fusion idea makes a lot of sense, Jack. But I can feel those who are deep, deep, deep in grief, trying to figure out what they can do, while there's other people in the congregation who truly believe that Trump will unite us. So, there you have it. It's right there. I do worry about the reality of what's happening now through political liberals, where there does seem to be that circular firing squad going on, whether it's the safety pin or the March in Washington or whatever, that issues that are, in my mind, threshold opportunities for people to actually stand up and get involved are being shot down, quickly. So it's a tense time, I think, for people to find, how do I even do the smallest act without being judged? So I think it's very much a pastoral time, a time of a lot of action and desire for action, and a time where people better take good care of their own spiritual lives.
Yeah. Thank you very much for that, Laura. That's really great thoughts. It's not easy, and it's going to be messy, right? That's a good reminder.
I would commend to people, and I'll write it here as well, the very first video in Beyond the Partisan Divide, the quality just stinks with the videos. We had to actually stop using them, which was my biggest mistake when we did the workshop. But the first video is a minister, I can't remember where her congregation is, but she talks about her parents and her moving from a liberal Christian faith, and when that got too conservative, coming over to Unitarian Universalism, really being a part of the church, being heavily involved, and then all of a sudden her parents stopped coming. And she was like, why aren't you coming anymore? And they were like, don't worry about it. Eventually she got them to say that because the Republicans, they no longer felt comfortable there, and they stopped going to the church. Wow. So I have this I have this huge thing, and I think it comes from maybe working with Project 515, but if we have any Republicans who want to be in our congregations, let's not make it a place where they will be constantly, hit by microaggressions, and instead be a place where they can come and start working, for the light versus the darkness. We need them among us. So that's kind of one, it's if you're liberal enough of a Republican to come to a Unitarian Universalist church, let's not make it hostile for them.
That's a great reminder. And I think that's a really challenging thing. And I think especially my experience is mainly in a larger congregation, 1,000 members potentially. And I think there is a certain assumption there with a congregation that big that everyone is sort of on the same page. And I just want to lift up that there is many forms of diversity, many facets of diversity, theologically, as Laura said in the chat down here, diversity of sexual orientation and expression and gender expression, and of course, spiritual practices and yes, political views, tactical approaches, right? There are many people who value racial justice work who have very different ideas about what tactics are the most useful or most productive or effective. And I guess what I'm most interested in, more than just finding the right one, is figuring out how even multiple approaches or multiple tactics could be useful. Or, this fusion idea, working across difference, it seems like there's a lot of value there. And I know it will be a messy work to lean into it, but it's also really exciting. So now I guess the question I have for the Lauras, where do you see these areas of common ground with your congregations who have differing political views? So in other words, what are some of the shared goals and values? Laura Smidzik, you just mentioned in the same-sex marriage fight, that was one of the common goals that people from both camps or both parties could get behind. What are some other ones that we're seeing right now, and where might we have access to lean in a little bit? Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah, I was thinking again in our congregation, and I'll just speak on what we're doing. Again, sponsoring refugee family through the Minnesota Council of Churches. It's obviously not just UU churches that do this. We have thousands of immigrants in Minnesota that have to be sponsored. So this is work that we're engaging in that many different kinds of churches, liberal and conservative, do. And so that connects us to work that they're doing. We also partner with an organization in Bloomington called VEEP, which offers housing and food assistance to folks in the Bloomington, Richfield area that need that assistance. And again, there are a lot of other organizations that are not like us that are doing that. And so it's just about, doing things beyond our walls with that other partner organizations that maybe are different than us are also engaged in. And again, I think, this pluralistic view that we try to hold, which is really difficult. I mean, don't get me wrong. We all know, we're all familiar with some of the other things that go on in our churches. We make it rough for the theists to be there and the Christians to be there. I don't think this is a big secret that I'm naming, but it can often be difficult for them to be there. And so some of this I really think just has to be personal. People really need to get engaged in a spiritual practice that helps them center themselves around our principles, or do whatever it is. If they don't like the word spiritual practice, do whatever it is that they need to really engage in those, because we'll put coexist bumper stickers on our cars, and yet if there's a theist sitting next to us in the pews sometimes, well, that's a problem. So we're not really coexisting, so we have I think just acknowledging that we have our own work to do. And we do this with beloved conversations, right? It's the same kind of thing, like when we're examining our whiteness. And so we need to examine the other things that we're holding on to, our liberal privilege, and really understand that our identity is our identity and it's not everybody's identity. And when we can come to terms with that, then maybe we can, see our voices as not being mono, but as being something else. And one of my favorite quotes is from Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. And he says that harmony is the creative synthesis of opposites. So if we are to think of creating harmony and peace in the world, that's a creative synthesis of opposite views. It's not one voice or one note that's drowning out all the others. That's not harmony. That's one loud note. Could
you repeat that quote again?
Yeah, it's harmony is the creative synthesis of opposites. And so we have to find a way to creatively synthesize our views with those views that might be opposite of ours. And yet our country has become a place, and maybe sometimes our church is a little bit too, where we just want to drown out the opposite view and the opposite voice and anything that's different than us. And so I think if we're in order to do this on a national level as a country, certainly we have to start practicing it within ourselves, within the people that are closest to us, within the people that we go to church with who do have different views than us, some of them. How do we creatively synthesize those things together, and really be creative and create something that's dynamic, that serves everybody. I think that goes a little bit with, I can't remember, Jack, what word you said that Sarah Smalley uses, multiplicity, multitudes, or something like that. But, I just like this idea of like pulling opposite things together to create something that's creative and vibrant and alive. So anyway, that's what I have to say on that, I guess.
Thank you. Yeah, the quote from Sarah Smalley was, "We contain multitudes." I mean, I'm sure it's many people have said it, but I've also heard, Laura, another little different version of what you just said as a quote, which is just that tension creates energy. That kind of idea, those opposites, that synthesis. Yeah. Well, Laura Smidzik, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I would say I have a lot more observing to do, but I feel strongly that, we need to work on our own use of language, stereotypes, self-righteousness, all the things that feel really good. But man, if we're doing it in church, I feel like we're not living out our faith. And so to me, I mean, honestly, when we did the Beyond the Partisan Divide discussion, I was a referee, and I was a referee who had to step in across the partisan divide in both directions and say, wait, is this language really going to get us closer to one another? Because what I'm hearing is really painful and triggering, in terms of what you're saying. And it was on both sides, really kind of returning back to the, let's use our I statements, which is easier said than done when you're really in pain and you think people have messed up your country on both sides. So to me, part of what I see in a congregation that is diverse, but also heading out into the world, is that we need to practice this in such a deep way that we won't be feeding the system of stereotypes and us and them, and that we will listen to other narratives than just that, and we will live into other narratives than just that. And I worry about it, honestly, because I see the pain in our congregations and I really understand it. I feel it too. I mean, it's immobilizing sometimes, but I really believe if we respond the same way as we feel they responded, the other side, the theys, there you go. How do you like that? Just broke my own rule that, the country won't heal. It's so, I don't know. I would say, and before we're doing large social action, we're trying to tend to our own hearts and each other and do some checks. I mean, we will certainly be doing social actions, and I'd love to talk to others, hear what other people are thinking. I had one member who was saying she's trying to do one thing a day that matters, whether it's write to a politician or make a commitment to go to a demonstration or do something. And I was like, man, what if we did that across UU churches and did it for a month prior to the inauguration, and had it be generic enough that the Republicans in my congregation could write in a note to the person they think is the best legislator they know, thanking them. And the Democrats could do the same thing, that wouldn't have to necessarily say, write a letter to Bernie or to Hillary, it could be bigger than that. But I'm just curious about what other people are doing to find a way, to move into action, but not necessarily polarize things. I'm in a humble moment, Jack. I have no clue.
I don't think that that's a bad place to be. I think, if anything, I think humility might be a trait that more of us can start embodying in ways that might be really rich. Just to kind of tag on that idea, Laura, I've also had a thought, listening deeply to others around me who are maybe grieving or upset about various components of the election result, who are also pointing themselves to not just tend to their own grief process, but to look to others who might be even more scared about some of the policies that were at least purported or proposed. That I wonder if we can also, while tending to ourselves, tend to others who might be even more marginalized or more at risk. And I love that daily practice of 30 days before the inauguration, doing one small thing, and in my head, one of those things is even just reaching out to neighbors, like telling a neighbor, maybe even a neighbor who visibly has some kind of marking that makes them more of a target. and just telling them that they're welcome there, that they're welcome and that they're a beautiful part of your community. You know, like what could that do as well? Oh, well, I think
I would say though that I don't think any of these are an either or. You know what I mean? Like that be caring for yourself and working hard in your congregation doesn't mean you're not doing other things as well. But
oh, absolutely. Yeah. Again, that's that we contain multitudes. Yeah, and I keep going back to Jane. I'll pull in, but others may have done it during the marriage amendment. But I remember at White Bear they had a link of a pink paper chain with everybody who had a conversation on the marriage amendment would add another link to that paper chain. And I mean, what is it that we're sort of feeling called to do that puts us in a discomfort zone? Because I feel like, yes, to go tell somebody, that we love them is, does that make us uncomfortable? If it doesn't make, potentially not, right? I mean, potentially it's just a way to kind of really put a big hug around that which we believe is most important and cherished. But what are we doing to disrupt our own comforts as well and try to move this country along a little bit in terms of healing? Yeah. Any other kind of final thoughts, Laura Thompson, from you? Any other thoughts or questions you want to pose to the group?
I guess I was just wondering if anybody else had questions or thoughts. I'm kind of wanting to feel where everybody else is at right now. Also, I posted over in the chat if you want those lawn signs. Send me an email.
Our congregation is watching Krista Tippett's WHERE lecture from last spring's GA, where she said, one of her points, she had many wonderful ones, but one was ask what hurts. Ask all of them and listen, really listen. Repeat all the things that go with active listening, repeat back to them, really ask them so that you know that you understand where they're hurting. And I think that means the people on all sides, and there are more than two sides in this election, because everybody's hurting somehow. I mean, the way the election went showed that nearly half of people were hurting in ways we weren't paying attention to. And now the rest of us are all hurting too. Everybody's hurting. And I think her point, ask what hurts and really listen, is important. It's amazing how prescient she was in so many ways, that WHERE lecture.
Any other questions or concerns from any of the participants tonight?
Kay, if you could chat with us and tell us the name of that piece by Krista Tippett, that would be great.
Sure. If you go to the GA recordings, General Assembly, UUA's General Assembly, the WHERE lecture is the big invited lecture that's given at one of the services. So you just go to WARE lecture.
Oh, there we go. Laura actually put it down in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Something that I mentioned this briefly before. Can you hear me? Mm-hmm. Something I mentioned before is that looking for common ground, because clearly half the country went one way and the other half of the country went another way. You could say that, but I think a couple commonalities is that people on the left and the right and all across really want a different established political system. I think a lot of the people on the right, didn't like what was happening with the typical Republican Party, and I think the same thing happened with people that were frustrated with what was going on with the Democratic Party, and I think that's a place of common ground. And I also think that people want better health care, you know, whatever that means, but I think we all want something better and cheaper there. And then another one is jobs and, you know, fixing our country and, you know, the infrastructure. So looking for a common ground and being able to find those commonalities with with my brothers and sisters is something I hope we can find and move on from there. There's plenty of reasons for division, but really we need to find the common ground so we can work together.
Yeah. So in the interest of time, we have about 10 minutes left and we have more than 10 people here. And I would love to ask a final question that we all would just tag in on just for like 30 to 40 seconds. I'm really curious from this moment, where are you now? What are some of the takeaways, tangible, concrete sort of takeaways from a conversation like this? Where is your mind going? How are you brainstorming ways to be active, to connect, to maybe build some of these bridges? I'd love to hear a quick 30 or 40 second kind of blurb from each person. Just where are you now, and what are the steps in your future that are going to build to this new future we can that we're dreaming of together? So let's just take maybe 20 seconds to sit in silence. And then if you would, just please share, again, maybe 30, 40 seconds, a brief recap, takeaways.
I feel really conflicted because I feel like I want to build bridges with those with whom I disagree. But first of all, I don't feel like we even have a common language in many cases. And the other thing is that there's this sense of guilt of, you know, am I betraying my friends who are people of color, or who, you know, who are the victims of the policies that folks have wanted to put in place. And so I feel very conflicted, and don't know where to go.
I'm finally figuring out how to work this. I'm sorry. I guess I just feel overwhelmed, and hopefully with Laura Thompson's help, I can figure out where I want to go.
Great, thank you, Lorna.
This is Mary Lou. I just want to say that the Isaiah organization, which has brought a lot of different church organizations together, has been working in Wilmer. And one of the things that they're proposing is that we meet with the mayor and try to make Wilmer a sanctuary city for our immigrant population. And so that, I think that will be probably taken to the city council in January or February. So that's a way that we are going to be very active. Mm-hmm.
Try again.
I feel very conflicted. Hello, can you hear me?
You should have you have to touch the icon where he is.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I'm just saying that I feel conflicted with this. I just see a new administration coming in that doesn't reflect any of the values that I hold, or you know, most of the people in the Unitarian Church that I go to here in Duluth don't reflect those values either. And I don't, it just seems there's so much emphasis here on compromising away your values that I just, you know, I just feel I left kind of feeling kind of frustrated with what I've heard here.
Can you hear me,
Yes, we can.
Jack?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm still feeling a whole mixture of feelings that I've struggled with. I think it brings home to me again that I really don't have what I would call a spiritual practice. And I'm not even sure what I would define that for myself, and I certainly don't practice it in any regular way. And I think that really would be helpful. So I am going to try to figure that out, because I think what I'm taking away from this is, and I kind of knew it coming in, that I have to work on myself first, or not first, but together with. And I think that there is so much disagreement in our country that I'm really scared and worried about whether our democracy is going to work. And I feel like it's got to be a way for people to actually talk and listen to each other and look for that common ground. Because from working on the marriage amendment, I know you don't persuade people by yelling at them and telling them they're wrong. And even though that's what I feel like doing sometimes. But so I do think things I've heard here tonight to remind me that we need to be more than tolerant, not agreeing with, but being open to understanding what people are feeling and what leads them to act that way. And that's a beginning. And I really like the idea of those lawn signs. I thought that was good. And I don't know how to, you're posting things on chat and I'm on the phone and I don't know how to get to those. So I hope maybe that will be available somehow. Jack can figure that out for me.
Yes,
Thank you.
I'm gonna be saving the chat, and then I will extract the resources and post them in one spot for us.
Thank you.
Yep.
This is Kay, and I thought what spoke most to me might be what Laura Smidzik started with is I have a lot of more observing to do. To me, I have a lot more active, reflective listening to do. A la Krista Tippett's Ask What Hurts.
I just want to respond around that compromising your values, because I really feel like this isn't just, it's not just one thing in my mind. So, I mean, I feel like, yes, we need to be engaged deep. We need to have organizations we partner with. We need to create safe harbor for those who are terrified by this administration and work on policies to protect them, and, register ourselves as Muslims if that's what Trump has happen, and, get in the street and put our bodies in harm's way if we're up for it. But I feel like it's the not forgetting what our root system is, and continuing to tap into our faith in a way that may
but it's still that we have to leave it on the table.
Yeah, that may remind us of a different way of being in the world, even as we do those things. So I don't mean it to sound like be passive and just be, kind to folks who have voted in Trump. But I guess I view it as being a part of both the resistance and the healing.
Did you want to say something,
Jack?
Bill?
Yes. I interviewed a psychiatrist, fellow member of First Unitarian Society of Minneapolis on the topic of finding inner peace in a turbulent world.
Mm.
And that half-hour interview of him, I've made now dozens of copies and handed them out to fellow Unitarian Universalists that requested them of me when I described what was on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish I could just hand you one right now, each one of you, see if it might be of value to you.
Mm.
But maybe I'll find a way to distribute the DVD to you.
Yes, that'd be great. Thank you, Bill. Sue, did you have something?
Yes, Jack. I would like to share my email, but I don't know how to share it. Could you tell us what we need to do that?
So Sue, you're still on mute, but could you just tell me your email and I'll type it in down in the chat box for you?
Okay. DAILEYSDUL@gmail.com. But I'd like to get the other emails as well, and
okay.
I didn't know how to plug that in.
Yeah, I will save the chat, and then I will put whoever does want their email address to be put around in this group. I can collate those and put them out as well on that resource page.
Thank you, Jack.
Of course.
Also, Jack, I can send you an image of the signs that I'm working on along with the printing company. You can get signs for me. Like I said, I'll have 250. But I'm hoping that I can just give them the name of the printing company and they have the design. You could order them through them and have them delivered to especially those outstate churches, if you wanted some.
Awesome. Yeah,
they already have the design. And maybe, and then you can pass it along also to, I specifically use Christian language on those signs so that they would be more accessible to Christians.
Yeah.
And so, so spread those signs to other churches as well beyond UU. So.
Awesome. Any final thoughts from anybody?
Thank you all very much.
Well, thank you too. Yeah, I'll just take the last moment here to say, I think for me that the really big takeaways are kind of harkening back to what Laura Smidzik, you were talking about, this sense of deep listening. I want to recognize that there's a tension, right? There's a hesitancy about not wanting to compromise our values, which I think is very valid. I'm trying to figure out ways how to, with firmly held values, to still listen deeply. I think even because one of our deep values is to listen deeply and to give inherent worth and dignity, not to ideas, but to people, and to know where those ideas are coming from, and often what sources of maybe even hurt and pain they might be coming from. And I think, I guess the words I want to end on, harkening back to Parker Palmer, which has been a really important book for many people right now. Again, the book Healing the Heart of Democracy. But words he said that were really encouraging to me, two different quotes. The more you know about another person's story, the less possible it is to see that person as your enemy. And then just to kind of give a little extra nuance. The civility we need will not come from watching our tongues. It will come from valuing our differences. So with that, I thank you all for coming tonight. Again, I'll be saving this chat and I'll give you a link to all these resources. This is a beautiful time to come together as a UUs across the state. So thank you for being part of this. And now we extinguish the chalice, but we keep the flame alive. May you be blessed and may you be a blessing. Thank you all.
Thank you and happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
You too, Rick.
See you, Rick. Bye.
Bye.
Happy Thanksgiving. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Yep. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Laura.
Fine.